Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Professor Gordon Awandare.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay, so it's a great pleasure to be joining you this morning at this summit, which I have been part of the organizing committee for. And my brother Fred and the team have worked very hard to put this together. And I'm glad that we're finally here and you're here as well to enjoy it. So, Professor Chair, Professor Smile Gavois GC, my brother, the president of Academic City University, faculty members present, our beloved students, the reason why we exist. So, I'm coming to you as a guy who wanted to be an engineer but didn't end up being an engineer. So it's always nostalgic when I interact with engineering students. Because when I was in pre-sec, I did mathematics, statistics, physics, chemistry. I didn't even do biology because my mind was that I was going to do engineering. And then when I finished my A-level and I got good grades, then my family members started working on me and telling me that I have to go and do medicine because they need a doctor in the family. Anyway, long story short, I went to pursue medicine in University of Ghana. I ended up not getting the medicine, and I ended up doing biochemistry, which has led me to many other opportunities, some of which I'll talk about. But, you know, the moral of the story is that sometimes the story is not as straightforward as you would imagine. But if you just keep plugging away and doing the best with what is put before you, eventually you'll find some success. You know, so for the young people, just do your best with what you have. You know, the only evidence of what you can do is what you have done with what you have. Even the little you have, if you're able to do well with that, then others will give you opportunities. So anyway, as you heard from my profile, I did my PhD in the US and did a postdoc there. And I came back to Ghana in 2010. I started my own research group. And then together with friends and colleagues at the Department of Biochemistry, Cell and Molecular Biology at the University of Ghana, and others from Noguchi Biomedical Engineering Department, we came up with this ambitious idea to start a center of excellence. And so we put our thoughts together and submitted a proposal to the World Bank African Centers of Excellence scheme. And we're fortunate enough to get support to start the center. And that was, so we started the center in 2014, and the center is now 12 years old, and a lot, yeah. And a lot has happened in that period, so I'll give you a little bit of some highlights of that. But essentially, we've created a theater for young people to enjoy science. Okay? Okay. Great. So, I hope, okay, good. So, as we know, we're all aware of Agenda 2063, which is titled The Africa We Want. And in the Africa we want well-educated citizens and a skills revolution underpinned by science, technology, and innovation. And I think all of us here will say yeah to that, okay? in 2063, some of us may not be around, but I know you people will be here. The young people will be here. You'll be here. So this is the pathway to it. For us to achieve that, we need sustainable research ecosystems. And when we talk about an ecosystem, we're talking about both the physical environment and the intellectual environment. And that is something that in Africa sometimes we lose sight of. We focus too much on the physical environment. We think that there's nothing. We don't have equipment, we don't have this, so we can't do anything. But the intellectual environment can lead to a better physical environment. And then together you'll be on the pathway to the Africa we want. And in the African context, universities are actually the best place for us to build sustainable research capacity. Because unlike in other countries where we have a strong private sector, here most of the intellectuals are in the universities. And if we really want to, build sustainable capacity, we have to use the universities as the engines for this. And I think Academic City University here has entered the Ghanaian market and is playing a very important role in that regard. And this is because in the universities we combine education, research, and innovation all in one place. And we can do this best when we partner with industry. Despite all the lofty talk, you know that investment in science has been low in Africa. Even though our heads of state committed to funding science with at least at least 1% of GDP, I think only about 4 or 5 countries can boast of more than 0.5% of GDP investment in science as we speak. So it has not been very encouraging when it comes to what our governments do with regards to direct support for science. And the fallout from that is that a significant number of our best brains have sought opportunities elsewhere. Even though some of us have come back, a significant number still remain out there. And I think that there are 2 major factors: the ecosystem, which is not conducive, coupled with low salaries, which make it impossible for people to have meaningful lives. But over the last 15 years or so, I think things have started to turn a little bit. And for us, we positioned ourselves to be part of this transformation and to take advantage of it. The type of work we do in science, we know that we need equipment that are expensive. We need, high level of technical skills. We need mentorship. And these are all weak points in the African ecosystem. A lot of you are here. I'm sure you wish you had, mentors like myself and Fred, who would be your friends and you can talk to us on a daily basis. Unfortunately, as much as we love to do that, we are too busy to give you the time you need in order for you to be successful. So because there's not enough of myself and Fred type of people in the system who can, provide the level of mentorship that is needed. And with those who are in the health research, historically, the funding that has come to Africa has focused on what we call, public health, which is what governments mostly focus on. That is what happens actually in the communities and in the field, And then there's some level of funding for clinical trials, which normally is funded by drug companies, mostly. But what the situation was that a lot of the innovative research was being done elsewhere and then brought here to try. So they develop drugs and vaccines, they have the IP, and they come and we basically help them try their vaccines and drugs, and then they go back and develop the vaccines and come back and sell it to us, okay? And we were happy to do that. A lot of academics in Africa were happy just to be conduits for collecting samples and for doing trials and all that, you know. And part of it was the funding landscape, where a lot of, funding agencies would not give money direct to African institutions, so they always direct the money to Cambridge and Harvard and, Hawkins, all places. And then they, out of generosity in their mind, they are reaching out and giving us some, okay? So that paradigm has, had existed for a while, and that limited our ability to grow. But like I said, around, the turn of the millennium, if you wish, things started to change a little bit, and funders realized that for us to make sustainable progress, there was a need to provide direct funding to African institutions. And I think that was really the game changer when it comes to research capacity on the continent. One of the big initiatives, like I mentioned earlier, was the World Bank African Centers of Excellence. Historically, the World Bank was not really interested in higher education. So this was quite a new strategy from them. And they had a very clever strategy. They launched what they call African Centers of Excellence project. The funding mechanism was quite innovative. So what they did was that they invited African governments to sign up to the scheme. And basically, the principle was that if you sign up as a government, then universities in your country are eligible to compete for the grants. But if they won the grants, the World Bank will give the money to the university, but it will charge it to the government as part of their debt that is owed to the World Bank, right? It was quite clever, right? Because they realized that there's no way that African governments will commit the level of resources that was needed to actually make a difference. But using this trick, they got a lot of African countries to commit, right? So we were fortunate Ghana signed up after a lot of lobbying, by the way, because the government was very reluctant at the time to sign. But they signed. So we've had 3 phases of this project now, with ACE1, ACE2, ACE3, and altogether, they spent over 450 million directly into African universities for, science centers of excellence and a lot of engineering centers of excellence as well. I think KNUST benefited from some of the engineering funding. And basically, the strategy was that they wanted the establishment of centers of excellence that focus on a specific discipline, that will provide skills to young people and deliver this through master's degrees, PhDs, and short courses, okay? And this led to establishment of, in the first phase, 22 centers of excellence in Western and Central Africa. In the second phase, 24 centers of excellence in Eastern and Southern Africa. And then there was what they call ACE Impact, was ACE3, which supported some of the existing centers and also established new ones. And in that phase, they supported 44 centers, which included 26 new ones and 18 existing ones. So this was a real big jolt into the system. And many of these centers are still thriving and sustainable. And I don't think there has been a more impactful, capacity building program on the continent, at least in my lifetime as a professional. Around the same time, the Wellcome Trust, working together with Gates Foundation and DFID, which is now called FCDO, which is a UK government agency, they also started another capacity building program, which was quite similar, but this one was mostly focused on health research. The World Bank one was everything science, engineering, mathematics, every STEM, everything was there. But this one was just health research. And for this, they've also done 2 phases now. Phase 1, they committed 100 million, which supported 11 programs. And then phase 2, 70 million, which supported 14 programs. And again, similar strategy, funding for infrastructure and for fellowships for master's, PhD students, and postdocs. For genetics, there was another initiative called the Human Heredity and Health Program, which was nicknamed A3 Africa. And this was also supported by Wellcome Trust and the NIH, National Institutes of Health in the US. And this was specifically focused on genetics research. And the impact of this was that there was a lot of new capacity for bioinformatics and genomics on the continent. So a lot of the bioinformatics capacity that has been established was through this program. And then the UK government, just before COVID, they changed their strategy temporarily and decided that all their overseas funding, they'll put it into a pot and then give it as grants to institutions in the UK in partnership with African institutions. And this was also very impactful because, although the funding didn't come directly to African institutions, the UK institutions that benefited were required to commit the majority of the funds to African institutions. And so this also has helped build a lot of capacity in African institutions. So anyway, WACBIP, like I started with, we took advantage of all these initiatives. We put a proposal to the World Bank, which we got, and then subsequently, using it as a platform, we were able to access funding from all these other initiatives that I've mentioned and others. So we've had the World Bank African Center of Excellence, two phases. We've benefited from 2 grants from there. The Wellcome Trust Deltas program, we've had 2 grants from there. Then we're part of what we call the Creek Africa Network, which was part of the UK GCRF funding that I mentioned. And then we're part of several other networks supported by various funders, including Gates Foundation, Arua, and others. So basically, when we started this, all of us had trained overseas. We had gone to do our PhD somewhere and then came back. And what we were driven by was, how do we create an environment that would allow us to provide the same training that we benefited from elsewhere, so that people don't have to go overseas to get the same PhD that I got, in molecular biology or cell biology, okay? So that was the main impetus. So we wanted a hub for biomedical research and training, and to use that to develop homegrown but globally competitive, African science leaders. And there were 6 guiding principles, really. It's to build capacity by providing a full training pipeline. We realized that there were gaps in our system. So somebody does very well in undergraduate, finish their bachelor's degree, and they're struggling for opportunities to go further. So they end up going to go work in the bank, even though they've done engineering, or they've done biochemistry, and they end up going to sell used car tires. Okay, brilliant students, and we realized that that's how the talent was leaking. So we wanted to create an environment where, if you are competitive, you get an opportunity to go to the next level. And then we wanted an environment where you could have high quality training, and that, like I said, is such an environment is one that has a high level of quality of intellectual, capacity, but also physical capacity. And then one of the things we learned was that you needed a specific skill set to survive in the peculiar research environment in Africa. Fred would tell you that when he moved back, there were so many things that he had to learn how to get around a lot of things that in the US he took for granted. And if you don't learn those other skills, no matter how brilliant you are, you would be frustrated and you leave. So you needed to be able to navigate the system, and we make this part of the training that we provide to the scientists that go through our program. And we wanted to also build all these students who came through our program to be a network of young scientists. One of the biggest problems we have is that we don't collaborate with each other enough. Many of us collaborate with people in the UK than we collaborate with other African scientists. So by having cohorts of African scientists from across the continent who sat together in class, did assignments together, failed exams together, cried together, passed exams together, celebrated together, there were bonds that, were built through that process, and these bonds would endure for the rest of their lives. And then, of course, research has to drive innovation and public health interventions. So mainly, we did this through a graduate program, master's, PhD programs, and then recently we also introduced a bioinformatics program. But our main graduate program was in molecular cell biology of infectious diseases. And so we had a master's and a PhD in molecular cell biology of infectious diseases. We also provided short courses, like we do 1 week or 2 weeks course in genome sequencing or bioinformatics, or cell biology, things like that. We use that a lot also. And one of the things that we had to do was to get accreditation for our programs, international accreditation. So in addition to the GTEC accreditation, which is tedious enough, we went for, Fred has horror stories about GTEC, so we also got accreditation from the Royal Society of Biology in the UK to give us that international validation, which was necessary for us to be globally competitive for funding. And so by sourcing different funding opportunities, we're able to provide a full pipeline like I described. So students who finish their bachelor's degree and have achieved a certain grade point average and are interested in doing research, we took them into an internship program, a paid internship program as part of their national service. So we got them into the center to do their national service, but we gave them a top-up to their allowance to motivate them to stay in research and work. And then after that, we had master's fellowships. So those who were so inclined would apply for our master's program and compete for fellowships. And then we had PhD fellowships. So those who finished their master's and are so inclined would compete for PhD fellowships. We had early postdoc fellowships. So those who finished their PhD and wanted to stay would compete for postdoctoral fellowships. And then we had, more senior postdoc fellowships for people who wanted to start their own research groups in a program that we call Career Accelerator Fellowships. So all these were funded by different funding agencies, some by multiple funding agencies. But what we're able to provide is this full pipeline. So if you wanted to stay in research and you were good, you could basically develop yourself into an independent scientist in our system. And during this process, we'll build your research experience. You get some training in mentorship. Whilst you are being mentored, you also mentor others, because normally we assign students to PhD students. So PhD students, whilst they are being mentored, they also mentor people. Postdocs also are assigned master's students and PhD students to work with. So they gain that experience of supervising and mentoring. And then, like I mentioned, building the resilience for independence in this peculiar environment. And then overall, we enhance your global competitiveness. Students who came out of our program, could basically go anywhere. We have some of them who went to Harvard, Cambridge, wherever. They went and they excelled because they went through a high-quality training program, which positioned them to be able to compete everywhere. And for the physical environment, we invested a lot of the resources to enhance the environment. A world-class center has to look like one. When you arrive there, you should see that you're in a world-class environment. Like you enter this auditorium, see that it's a world-class auditorium, right? It makes, yes. It affects your motivation, your level of motivation, yeah, right? When you enter the place, just the looks. It's not trivial. So we've invested a lot of resources to really upgrade the environment. And what we did was to invest in certain particular technology platforms that support our work. So we call these the WAGBIP technology platforms. And the main ones are flow cytometry, next generation sequencing, advanced microscopy and imaging, protein expression platform, bioinformatics and data management, high performance computing, which I'm sure many of you as engineers would be familiar with. And then we have a quality management platform that oversees all the regulatory aspects. And so in addition to supporting our research, these platforms also raise funds for us because people can come and use these at a fee, So people from other departments, other universities, in fact, other neighboring countries come and use these facilities and pay for the service. Because it's very expensive to maintain high-end equipment, This genome sequencer, for example, every year we have to pay $45,000 as a service fee for it to be maintained, okay? And so it's not easy to maintain advanced equipment. It's our high-performance computing system here. We installed it in 2015, 2016. And this year, we're replacing everything because, as you know, computers don't live forever. So we spent $350,000 to install the first one. Now we are replacing it at a cost of $500,000. So science is expensive, and that we cannot run away from. Yeah. In terms of research, we obviously started with infectious diseases because that was our initial selling point, that was our strong point. But having set up all these technology platforms, it was very easy to then extend to other types of research, including into non-communicable diseases such as cancer. And the bridge to that was the genetics that we did and the genomics. This makes it easy to study, what are the genetic bases for cancer and for heart disease and even hearing impairment. Hearing impairment is one of the diseases that we've done that has been very interesting. Many of you know of a village called Adamarobe where there's a high percentage of people with hearing impairment. Are you aware of that? You don't know. Please read newspapers, so in addition to your social media. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't know about this, but there's a village in the eastern region where the proportion of people who have deafness is higher than usual anywhere in the world. And it's been steadily increasing, right? So almost every household there's somebody who is deaf, And for a long time, nobody really bothered to understand what was happening. So one of our PhD students did a study where we went into the village and recruited families and sequenced their genomes, basically, and found that there's actually a genetic mutation that predisposes them to the deafness. And this is passed on from generation to generation. Obviously, it's not 100% inheritance, as you know, with genetics. It's not everybody who would inherit. But with time, the proportion of people has been increasing. And this was very interesting work. We even developed a simple test to detect this mutation, which we have asked the Ministry of Health to consider adding it to newborn screening so that when new children are born, especially in such communities, they can screen them and find those who are most likely to develop hearing impairment so they can give them specialized care. Yeah? And it's interesting that you haven't heard, but when we published the work, BBC came to Ghana to come and do a story about it. But people in Ghana don't even know. You know, it is the society we live in. People are not interested in scientific discovery unless it is unless related to football or beauty pageants. It doesn't, or musicians. It doesn't break through the news, or politicians, right? Anyway, so this is the portfolio that we have. What is common for the work we do is that we focus on using molecular and cellular approaches to understanding disease, and then through that, developing new strategies for diagnostics, for vaccines, and for drugs. So I just give you a few examples of research that our fellows do. These are mostly postdoc fellows. So Felix Ansah, who is a postdoc fellow working with me, for example, he has, since his PhD time, has been working on developing what we call point-of-care diagnostics. So for our environments, we are looking at how you can have diagnostic devices that you can use in a village without the need for electricity, you know, and that can be quick enough that you can get a result within 30 minutes. And then also that you can diagnose multiple pathogens, right? In our part of the world, when somebody has fever and goes to the hospital, usually it's not one thing. They have some bacterial infection, they have malaria there, they have some cold, you know, it's a lot of things. So if you go and you start doing the trial and error of, you test for this and say, oh, it's not that one, so you give some medicine. Then they go home after 3 days, not getting better, then they come back. Then you give another medicine, you know. So the idea is to have a diagnostic device that can detect multiple pathogens at the same time, but within 30 minutes, right? And so he has been working on this, using the principle that it should be low cost, it should be based on using available materials that we don't need to import all the time, and that it should be integrable to, you know, your phone and mobile devices, so that you don't need, you don't need to have Wi-Fi or anything like that. It can just be transmitted to your phone. I mean, the results can be transmitted to your phone. So he's done a lot of work on this, and he has actually worked with engineering students, and these are some of the works they are doing, trying to design these in-house. And he has a 3D printer, and he prints some of the components and all that. It's very interesting work, and any of you who are around Legon, you can come and talk to him if you are interested. And then for the genomics, we do both pathogen genomics and we do what you call host genetics or human genetics as well. So for example, Collins, who is from Kenya, is one of our postdocs. He's looking at parasite variation from the viewpoint of the mosquito stage, the oocyst in the mosquito, okay? Most of the time we are looking at what happens in the human beings, but some of the diversity comes from what happens in the mosquito stage. So he's getting the oocysts from mosquitoes and sequencing those and looking at the genetic relatedness of these parasites. And then we have Kevin, who is from Cameroon, and he's working on sickle cell disease. I'm sure many of you know people who have sickle cell disease. You may even have family who have sickle cell disease. And in many cases, those who have the disease itself, not the carriers, they normally have, several health complications. and they have different health complications. Some have mild ones, some have severe ones, and so on and so forth. So we are looking at what kind of genetic patterns that we can use to predict how somebody will do when they have sickle cell disease. Okay, and so he's doing this using genetics databases that are available from Africans across the world. And then we do some drug discovery research. Here are two examples. Constance is a Ghanaian lady who is a postdoc, and her approach is to look at how we can repurpose drugs. So there are a lot of cancer drugs out there, and she's looking at, based on the targets of these drugs, you can try some of them and see whether they have an impact on malaria or some of our other common diseases. So in her case, she's looking at Plasmodium falciparum kinases and screening anti-cancer drugs to find those that inhibit Plasmodium falciparum kinases. And she's found some, and she's now looking at how she can modify the structure is trying to find inhibitors to this enzyme, which is Plasmodium falciparum calcium-dependent protein kinase 4, which is an enzyme that's essential for the malaria parasite. And so he's using AI and machine learning to try to determine inhibitors, screening through drug databases, all the compounds that he can find to try to identify potential inhibitors of this enzyme, which can then be optimized for use as a drug. In terms of impact, we have published many, many, many papers over the last 12 years. And for us, our principle is that the students always lead. So the majority of papers, my time is up. The majority of papers, 10 minutes is fine. I'll be done in 10 minutes. The majority of papers, the students lead. So if you're a PhD student, master's student, postdoc, your work, you are the first author, and the supervisor will normally be the last author. And that's our principle in order to support the career development of our fellows. So our fellows have published over 450 high-impact papers since 2014. Yes, and like I said, this is where you have African scientists leading. Not those days that when you publish the paper, the lead author is from Harvard or Cambridge, and then our names are in the middle somewhere. For us, all the work we do, we own it, So the lead author is from, yeah. And if you look at the range of diseases, we've published on, pretty much about anything. But most of our work has been in malaria and COVID, as you can imagine. But, we've done everything across the board. Yeah. In terms of numbers of people who have benefited directly from our scholarships, we've had about 324 master's students, out of which 195 have completed, the others are still at various stages. We've had 145 PhD students, 88 have completed. We've had 67 postdocs, and 51 have finished. And in terms of where they've come from, you'd see that majority are from Ghana and the West Africa region, but we've had students from other parts of the continent as well. And so to date, we've given support to 536 African scientists for master's, PhD, or postdoc from across the continent, about 22 African countries. And these are brilliant young scientists who would have left the continent to go do the same thing somewhere else. In fact, we have some of our students who did their masters with us, had opportunities to do PhD outside, and they said no, they will do their PhD here. because they get a chance to travel anyway to attend conferences and to visit other labs. They want to be home, okay? So they do their PhD here because they don't see, they've gone to Cambridge, they've gone to Oxford. They don't see much difference between what they have in their labs and what we have here. So there's no point in going to suffer in the cold, okay? Right? So, sorry. So in addition to what we do through the long-term degree programs, like I mentioned, we do a lot of short courses, which some of you may have benefited from or could benefit from in the future. We do genome sequencing workshops. We do what we call experimental genetics, which basically teaches you how to manipulate genes, right? We have bioinformatics, which many of you may have competence in. And then we do drug resistance surveillance training. And through this, we've given opportunities to over 2,000 Africans from across the continent. And these are some of the pictures from that. And then we do a lot of community engagement. Our students, we always encourage them to go to the community. We support them to do health screening, to do community endeavors, go to senior high schools and demonstrate experiments to the students, and just spread the love of science to young people, especially young girls, to encourage them to do science. And we also do community events. Normally when you have World Health Day, World Hearing Day, World AIDS Day, all those events, we go to the community and we celebrate these events with them. All right. So where are the people who we have trained? So one of the things that we love to do is to track where our students go when they finish. So these data have to even be updated, but in terms of the proportions, they haven't changed that much. Our master's students, most of them have gone on to do further studies, either with us or elsewhere. Some of them are working in industry, in academia, in the public health sector, and a few of them are doing unrelated things, like I mentioned, going to do, sell car tires or work in the bank or whatever. And then for the PhD graduates, it's even much more skewed towards academia and research institutions, fewer in industry and public health. Postdocs, nearly all of them are in academia, in universities and research institutes. And we have one person in the industry that I'll tell you about. And then how about how we are doing in terms of retaining the talent, like I mentioned. Look at our former PhD students. Only 17% are out of the continent, so 83% are on the continent, okay? So they finished their PhD and they're here. They're happy to be here. For the postdocs, it's even more. 91% are on the continent, okay? Yeah. More than that, we encourage what we call brain circulation, which is bringing some of our talent back. Okay, so when I travel to different places and I give talks like this, I always ask for who the African students are, and I have a chat to them and I ask them who wants to come home, and some of them actually want to come home. And so we work with them to help them get grants that allow them to come home. And through that process, we brought 8 people back from the diaspora. One went back after their fellowship, but 7 of them have stayed here, okay? And they've settled and they're here. And this was because we created both a physical and intellectual environment that allowed them to be here. In fact, just last year, or early this year, we got one who we helped get a Wellcome Trust Early Career Award. It's a 5-year grant. And now he's in the process of relocating from Australia to come and be at WACBIP for the next 5 years. And hopefully he will remain here after that. So it is part of our strategy to help them transition back home. One of our former postdocs is Yao, that many of you may know. He branched off and started his own biotech company. One of the challenges of what we do is that we have a very weak biotech industry in Ghana. So we do a lot of this discovery work, and then we don't have the uptake. If it were in the US, some small companies will come, biotech companies, and come and take these discoveries and turn them into a product, and we share the proceeds. But it's very difficult to get that here. And so Yao decided to take a plunge and start his own biotech company. And he's actually doing very well. I'm sure some of you have seen him. So this is, and we're continuing to encourage this type of entrepreneurship from our scientists. So the guy who's working on the diagnostics, we're now helping him to possibly start a company to develop diagnostics and sell them. So that's the strategy. Yeah. All right. So to conclude, how do we sustain the impact? So now we have, so many things going on in a positive way across the continent. Centers of excellence, new progressive universities like the one we have here. How do we maintain this momentum? First thing is retaining the quality that we have, retaining our brains, okay? And this is not only academic, admin people too, very important. And Fred will tell you how important it is to have a strong administrative backbone. For you to be successful in your science, you have to have a peaceful mind from all the other things, the financial and administrative stuff. You have to have top-notch people who are efficient so that you don't have to be worried about how to manage those things. So it can free you to focus on science. So we need to maintain our quality personnel. We need to promote innovation and research translation, like I talked about. Let's encourage people to start businesses and take their knowledge and develop products. We need to do that. We need to reform our institutions to promote research and interdisciplinarity. In fact, this is where there's ongoing work in the universities. A lot of universities are very conservative, very difficult to navigate. We have been able to navigate that process. In fact, I've been giving lectures on how to build a center of excellence within a university system, a traditional university system, right? This university is a more progressive university, so it will not be as difficult. Fred understands a lot of things, so if you want to have a center of excellence here, it will not be as difficult. But if you are in a traditional university where people are so conservative and fixed in, this is how we do it. No, we don't do that here. It's very difficult to be successful, and we need to, revolutionize our university administration. This postdoc position, what we have realized is that it's so important to have this postdoc position properly integrated in the university structure and recognized, because in many places, postdocs are the drivers of research and innovation. And in many African countries, we don't recognize who postdocs are. In fact, when we started our postdoc program, we had a lot of challenges with university administrators. They say, who is this? I mean, what is a postdoc? Is it a student or a lecturer? And I say that they are lecturers, but they do only research, okay? But these are necessary changes we need. We need cross-continental mentorship programs. As I mentioned, there's such a shortage of successful academics to mentor the young ones. And we need to harness all the Africans we can have, including those in the diaspora. They can help mentor our students. So in our program, in addition to supervisors, the students have mentors who are different from their supervisors. And some of these mentors are our international collaborators. And they have monthly meetings with them on Zoom to just talk about their careers and get advice. Okay, we need to have such programs. And, let me beat the drum. African governments need to do more. They need to really step up with the funding. Ghana, now our research and innovation fund is set up. Let's hope that it will not just be a shell. Let's hope that actually resources will go in there and we can be applying for grants from there instead of always applying for grants outside. So that is the beginning. Even if you start with small, When I met the Minister of Education, when he first took over, I told him how important it was to operationalize that. And I told him that I know funders who have told me that if we start such a fund, they can match whatever the government puts in there. If the government puts $5 million, Gates Foundation can say, I'll put also $5 million in there. But if you don't show that you yourself, you have the commitment, why should they keep giving you money? Okay? And then we have to reform a lot of government policies, which I say they are science blind. Our procurement processes are completely science blind. When you talk to government procurement people, when they wrote the laws, they were not thinking about how to buy reagents or buy scientific equipment. They were thinking about how to buy Land Cruisers and chairs and tables. So it's a completely different mindset. There are best practices everywhere. So when I talk to people, procurement people, and they say, "Oh, you have to do this, you have to do that," I ask them that, why are we doing this? We want to be like Cambridge, we want to be like Harvard. Why don't you ask them how they do procurement for science? They don't do what we are doing here. We are wasting so much time. You want to buy something, it takes 6 months to buy it. How do you compete? When I was in the US, if I wanted to buy anything to work with, I order it the evening before I go home. In the morning when I come, I trip over it at my door. When I get to the office, the thing is lying at my door. They've delivered it already. So if I do an experiment, it doesn't work, I just throw it away and order another one. Tomorrow it will be there, I'll try it again. That's how you innovate. Here, you have to go through so many approvals before the order is even made. And then when the order is made, it goes through about 3 different middlemen before it comes. How do you compete? And these are things that government can just cut off and say, look, for science, we exempt you from all this, And then duty at the airport, all this, Equipment that somebody has given you money to buy. When it gets to the airport, they say no, they will collect 30% or whatever tax on it. Our government hasn't given us money to buy equipment, which they are supposed to do. Somebody else sitting in another country using their taxpayers' money have bought equipment for us. And our own government, wants to tax the thing. Those who give us the equipment, they think we're crazy, right? So these are things that we need to reform. Like I mentioned, the private sector is weak when it comes to science. We need to incentivize investment there. Government policies can incentivize investment in science. The government can say that all biotech startups, no taxes for 15 years, and you are exempt from import duties. Let them build. They will create jobs, they will create innovations, they will pay for themselves. If we can think that way long term. Travel, we have all these centers of excellence, but we can't get to each other. A few weeks ago, I was going to Uganda. It took me a whole 24 hours to get there. Meanwhile, direct flight to be maybe 4.5 hours or something. But I have to go to Addis and go and sit there for 6 hours before I catch another flight. Why do we do this ourselves, right? And then, in all this, I keep saying that get someone in the room. So Prof is here, she's in the room. That's what we need. We need people to be in the room where decisions are made. So don't shy away from going into politics. Some of us have to get there and change the system. Because when decisions are made, if you are not there, nothing will happen. I decided to apply to be Pro Vice Chancellor because I wanted to be in the room when the university decisions are made. It's not because I want to have posts, okay? Or that I want to earn any higher salary. In fact, I could earn more money just doing science. But I wanted to be in the room because I found that some university decisions were ridiculous. Okay? So I want to be in the room and be part of the reasoning process when decisions are made. So let's get people in the room. All right. So thank you very much. I want to acknowledge all our students, our staff.